For anybody that doesn't know, Ricky Proehl is the person I have the honor of interviewing today. I've interviewed Kevin Carter, one of his former teammates. I've interviewed a couple of the players he's trained. And as someone who's played 17 seasons in the NFL, you have the fifth most games played as a receiver in NFL history. You've played in the slot. You've played in the outside. You've played against almost every type of defense in the NFL. And I've had the pleasure of watching you train tight ends. I've watched you train receivers with all different types of skill sets and different body types. And a major discussion heading into this Super Bowl, major discussion during the regular season, especially on the internet and definitely in NFL media, has been Cooper Kupp's production. From your perspective, to what extent has his production solely reliant on his ability to get free releases from the slot or just playing the slot in general compared to the outside?
Cooper is an outstanding wide receiver. I think not just physically, but mentally. I mean, I'd probably put him up against anyone as far as one of the smartest football players in today's game, especially at the receiver position. And that's what enables him to do what he does. I think McVay understands what kind of player he is, and he puts him in a position to be successful. And obviously he gets a tremendous amount of targets. And I think a lot of people, that's the biggest discussion. I mean, he probably averages, I think someone's saying 15 targets a game, but it's because of his knowledge of the game and understanding of concepts and defenses and what they're trying to do. And I think he's a coach on the field, and McVay understands that. So McVay, he's his go-to guy because he knows that Cooper is a smart football player and he's going to make the plays when he needs them. And that's, as a coach, that's an amazing tool to have. The more tools you have in your toolbox as a coach, I mean, now with Odell Beckham really coming on, getting Akers back to running back, Higbee, who is a tremendous tight end, has really shown a lot of growth this year in his production. And Van Jefferson, a young guy who's really can make plays as well. But Cooper is the mainstay that when they need a play, when they need a big play, they go to Cooper. And you can't take that from him. Is it easier in the slot? Do you get more freedom, more free space to run? Yes. But still, you got plays. You got to get open. You got to make the catches. And he's been able to do that consistently all season long.
So like you kind of just alluded to near the end there, and a lot of people talk about how other teams' number one corners don't necessarily follow him inside to the slot, and he gets some of those free releases. From all of your experience playing and coaching in the NFL, how come teams sometimes aren't as willing to slide their number one corner in to press the slot receiver, whether that be Cooper Kupp in this specific example, or when the Packers slide Devontae Adams inside?
It's a great question, Tristan. It's you look around the league, some of your best corners, and a lot of these guys, the scouting departments, the GMs, the coaches are looking for those big physical guys to play on the outside that can help support in the run game, to stop the run game, but can also stop some of these big receivers, these 6'5" receivers, 6'6" receivers. But not everybody has that starting corner that is your number 3 corner. And a lot of times those guys are the best nickel guys, are a lot of the smaller stature guys, those 5'10" guys, 5'11" that are really quick, that can move laterally, because it's harder. It's harder. Just like it's easier to play in the slot as a receiver, it's harder to play in the slot as a defensive back, because that receiver has two-way goes. You can't use the sideline to your advantage and shade a guy to force him to the sidelines. It's the middle of the field. It presents itself such an advantage for the receiver, and it's hard to find DBs that can do that. They're out there, but they're few and far between, and that's what a lot of those starters on the outside, because of these defenses and how they're made up, to have big physical guys on the outside that can stop the Higgins, the T. Higgins, who are big, the Mike Evans. I mean, look at Jalen Ramsey. He's probably, top 2 or 3 cornerbacks in the league? He'd have a hard time playing inside just because of his build and his stature. So I hope I've answered your question, but a lot of times it's hard for those guys to go inside because of their stature.
Why do you think Sean McVay has chosen to put Cooper Kupp in the slot almost every single time? And how successful do you think Cooper would have been if he was utilized more on the outside?
You have more plays inside than you can from the outside. Outside, you got a lot of your traditional routes, whether it's a curl, a 9-stop, a comeback, a go route. And it makes it more difficult. They can go cover 2 and get your hands on those receivers. It's a lot more work on the outside to beat cover 2, to beat man coverage than it is on the inside. Because like I said, you can run shallow crosses, deep overs, you can run corner routes. You're in such a wide open space. And I think if he had to play on the outside more, it takes a lot more out of you physically. And I think also Cooper gets those opportunities because Cooper's been there. Cooper is one of McVay's draft picks. He's been consistent for 2-3 years now. And I think he's just his go-to guy. He's been there longer. Not to say that next year, if they sign Odell back, he won't get more targets, because I think he will. Odell has done a tremendous job of coming in mid-season, learning this offense. And you can see his progression over the last 3 to 4 weeks, how much more he's been involved, how many big plays he's made. He's a huge contributor now. And I think that's just going to make them more dangerous next year if they decide to bring Odell back. But Robert Woods, Cooper wasn't getting as many reps with Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks. But when you have the one guy that he's been there, you feel comfortable as a coach when you dial up numbers, because Cooper's so comfortable with this offense and feels so good about what he's doing, and he's playing with so much confidence. It's hard not to just feed him the football and put him in a position to where he can make plays. And a lot of those plays are from the inside.
It is kind of wild when you look at how the receiver room has developed over this season. Obviously, Cooper Kupp has been there the entirety of the year. And then unfortunately, they lost Robert Woods when Odell came in. But Deshaun Jackson was even in the receiver room at the beginning of the season. But you also spoke about how the slot allows you to get to different parts of the field. And obviously, all different types of routes are targeted at getting deep on the defense or across the middle, or setting up the defense in the red zone. And I've learned so much from watching your training sessions, especially just the other day when you were working with Mike and Cannell. You went over the sail route and how to set up the DB inside to then get over the top, especially against the cover two. And it has definitely enhanced my level of understanding of how offenses work in the NFL, watching your training sessions with a wide variety of receivers from every different level, high school, college, and even professional. So what do you think is the biggest thing the average NFL fan doesn't understand about how the offenses work in the NFL, whether it be timing, route concepts, and what do you think is the most misrepresented piece of the wide receiver position in the media, whether it be major media outlets or smaller ones?
I think it's understanding the concepts and understanding guys like Cooper, Odell, some of your great receivers, the Mike Evans that, has had a consistent career. Devontae, it's being where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. It's all timing. And sometimes if you're running a sail route, you don't want to run it 100 miles an hour because you got a guy on the outside that's clearing the zone out for you. You're flooding a zone and he's clearing out for you. So you don't want to be 100 miles an hour and get to your spot too fast, because the quarterback isn't ready to throw yet, or that receiver on the outside hasn't had the opportunity to clear that guy fully yet, that corner, get him out of that zone, get him out of that area where they're trying to throw the football. So it's little nuances like that, the concepts of the timing of the routes and receivers understanding the timing, and when that clock goes off, when they have to be where they're supposed to be, that the quarterback expects them to be at certain spots so he can deliver the ball on time, or he's taking a play action fake to the running back, and then he's getting his drop and then hitch step, and then he's delivering the football. So all those things play a part in making a play successful. And I think a lot of your normal fans don't understand that. Hey, why doesn't he get rid of the ball? Well, he got pressure and he couldn't get rid of the ball because the receiver didn't have enough time. They disrupted up front to where now he's got to change, the pocket changes and he can't deliver the football like he wants to. And now it changes. It changes the concept of the route. Now it's a broken play. And it's those things that I think your normal fan doesn't understand, the complex offenses and what everybody has a job, even if they're ball. Sometimes you're a decoy. Your job is to occupy certain players, whether it's a safety, whether it's a linebacker, to get their attention, to open up a window for someone else. And I think there's so much that goes into it that a lot of people don't understand. And for a quarterback, it all happens in a split second. It's all within 3 seconds. That's what makes this game so great, unbelievable to me.
Was there ever a point in your playing career or coaching career where the game plan was set up a certain way, the head coaches and offensive coordinator were making certain decisions, and there was a type of narrative in the media or even maybe extended friends or family around you where you were not getting the ball or the offense wasn't operating like it could be? Is there a specific moment that you look back to when it relates to that type of question?
Well, as a coach, absolutely. And I'd rather not I'd rather not share because it'd be fun under the bus. But yes, it happens quite often. Just to give you an example, like, if you're a team that likes to get chunk plays, those chunk plays are deep plays, 20, 30, 40-yard throws. They're big plays. And, I've been on teams as a player and as a coach to where we got chunk plays, and that was a big part of our offense. But sometimes you have to make adjustments. If you're playing a team that has two great rush ends, you got to be smart. You got to change your game plan, because if those guys are coming up the field, you're not going to have time to throw those 7-step drop, 20, 30-yard pass plays down the field. And sometimes you got to wear those guys out. You got to throw quick game, get the ball out, because they're coming up the field. And eventually they lose their steam. They lose their mental state of pinning their ears back and coming for the quarterback. If the ball's out every time they take a couple steps and the ball's out, now they're not coming as hard, and then you take your drops. And I think as a player, sometimes, not to say these coaches are unbelievable what they do in figuring out games, sometimes you have to make adjustments. And if you have a left tackle that's hurt or not 100%, and you got Von Miller coming off the edge, it's like the Rams, like Cincinnati better have a plan of getting the ball out, especially early on. Wear those guys out, try to establish a run game to slow that great front four down, so you can really get some plays down the field. But sometimes you just got to, that's what Tom Brady has done a great job throughout his career, is dinking and dunking. And then when it presents itself, he takes a deep shot, and he's had a lot of success. I'm surprised more coaches don't mimic what New England did, and then what Tampa does, just watching Brady and how he takes what the defense gives him.
Well, I think it also speaks to Tom Brady that he did it with two different teams then eventually so late in his career, and that no one else has been able to replicate that type of success over 2 decades. And you mentioned earlier, I also agree, it's very true that there's multiple ways an offense can be successful. There's multiple ways for a player to be successful. So many different releases that players will use on different routes. And the wide receiver position, I think, is more dynamic than a lot of people understand. I think even sometimes it appears that talent evaluators look at the receiver position. And over the last 5-7 years, and of course, over the course of NFL history, I think we've seen a lot of receivers who didn't necessarily live up to expectations. And in recent years, we've seen DK Metcalf get passed up on in favor of Andy Isabella, JJ Arcega-Whiteside, N'Keal Harry, receivers who haven't lived up to their expectations and definitely draft position. Whereas DK Metcalf looks like he's one of the top 20 receivers in the NFL. And just recently, Jalen Reagor was picked over T. Higgins and Justin Jefferson. So you even have the insight as a coach as well as a player. Why do you think it seems like the front office, and I've also heard you tell stories about certain receivers that you wanted to draft, but the front office wasn't necessarily too high on. So why do you think it's such a hard position for the front office to evaluate, where it seems like in retrospect, it's always so obvious that Justin Jefferson was maybe the better pick over Reagor?
I think a lot of it is some of the scouts fall in love with guys. They follow them throughout their career, and they may have had a great career in college, and it's like anything. You meet someone, you get to know them, you fall in love with them, not just as a football player, but as a person. And I think a lot of these guys, these scouts that are at these schools for years, and they get to know some of these kids. But I think, to me, to be successful, you got to have management, whether it's scouts, GMs, and coaches, on the same page. They got to have a relationship where the GMs and the scouts understand the offense. They understand the defense, and what your scheme is and what kind of player you're looking for, whether it's in the slot, outside, what kind of offense are you running is going to bring in a player that's tailor-made for your offense. I think that's a huge component. I look at the Rams team that I was on. You had Isaac and Torrey on the outside, and you had me and Oz on the inside. We were all interchangeable. But at the end of the day, we were all smart football players to where we could play any one of each other's positions. So that's why now all of a sudden we may be running the same play, but we're at different positions. And so now they don't know what we're running, because who knew where we were going to line up? And I think that was a huge component. But to answer your question, I just think guys look at certain players like a Justin Jefferson. He'd probably be successful wherever he plays. Guys like Metcalf, he landed in a perfect spot. He's here. He's in a system where he's big, he's strong, he's fast. There's not many guys that can throw the long ball like Russell Wilson. He goes somewhere else, he might not have the same stats and 3 years that he's had in Seattle. If he goes somewhere else where they're more ball control, run the football, play action, comeback, stuff like that. They did a tremendous job of drafting someone that was fitted to their system. And I think there's teams out there that, the general managers draft some guy because they love him because he's fast and he's quick and he's got hands, but maybe he's not a great route runner. And the system that he works for, they're all about route running and timing passes. You got to get guys that can run certain passes, and so the quarterback can get the ball out. And some guys don't fit that. Some guys are just freelancers. They're deep, they're mainly deep guys. They're one trick ponies that they're made to go deep. And then there's the Tyreeks who can do a lot of stuff, but they've fit that offense around Tyreek. Because you look at it, it's not like you're seeing him run just regular comebacks, digs. He's running deep overs. He's running shallow cross, wide receiver screens. They've molded the offense around their players. And that's when you have success as a team, is when you almost draft a guy and then you realize we got to do things to get him the football. We got to find ways to get him the football. And that's when teams are successful. We did that with Steve Smith at Carolina. Steve was an amazing football player that was so dynamic when he got the ball in his hands, but we had to find ways to get him the ball because he became a great route runner. Early on, he was the one that if it was a run play and the corner was off, turn around, Steve, we'll throw you the ball, and then it's a punt return. And he would stiff arm the guy and take it 60 yards for a touchdown. And those are the things that coaches, it's like, let's not make it more difficult than it needs to be. And I think those are the teams that have success. And that's why, you go back to McVay and what he's done with Cooper and how he's slowly incorporated Odell more. And he's brought Higbee in, and now Akers. Akers is going to play a huge part in the Super Bowl. And Cincinnati. I mean, no one talks. Zach Taylor was with the Rams back when they played the Super Bowl years ago. He was the quarterback coach. He knows a lot about this football team. But you look at what he's built. He's got a big receiver in T. Higgins. He's got Tyler Boyd in the slot. He's got Chase as one of the most dynamic receiver, if not the dynamic rookie receiver in NFL history. And now he's got a running back in Joe Mixon. I mean, if the defense can slow up the Rams, this could be a great football game, because Cincinnati arguably has some weapons. It's just a matter of, can they protect them up front?
Well, the Titans certainly showed off the Bengals' weakness, and I think a lot of people are calling Aaron Donald one of, if not the greatest defensive player of all time now. I know you definitely would probably side on the guys of like LT and the Reggie Whites of the world. Especially being a Giants fan growing up.
I will say this, kind of what we talked about in the slot. And now I didn't play defensive line, but it was probably a little easier for LT to come off the edge. Aaron Donald, to do it interior like that and bring the pressure that he does, he is absolutely amazing. He's unbelievable, and he may be right up there with LT. Is he better? I don't know if there's ever a better. LT changed the game. They started looking for LTs. I mean, everybody was looking for a Lawrence Taylor off the edge, and the Von Millers, the Derek Brooks, all those guys. He revolutionized the defensive end position.
Fortunately for Aaron Donald, as far as the mystique of greatest player of all time, edge rushers, I think, definitely pop off the screen to just everyone in general. You see them come off the edge, the tackle falls down, or they bull rush the tackle into the quarterback's lap. And then Aaron Donald sometimes has to deal with Quentin Nelson and the center on one play, and then has to beat both of them. So he's not necessarily popping off the screen every single play, which I think plays to the edge rusher's favor. And you kind of already answered this question already, but there's another element to it I wanted to ask. It seems like a situation can have a great effect on a player's career, especially their short-term success. Have there been any players that you've known, playing with, coaching, that you've seen now in your post-career, owning Prolific Park, where you feel like a situation just destroyed their career, or just brought their career to another level that it wouldn't have gotten to if they were drafted into a worse team or a completely different offense?
I think you could use so many examples. Getting drafted to a good football team with good players to where they're going to, put you in a position to be successful. I mean, I think you can ask yourself the question, would Cooper Kupp be the same player if he went to Jacksonville, or if he went to the Texans? You can add Justin Jefferson. I think he'd be good anybody. But if you go to a team like the Jets, is he a first 2-year Pro Bowler? Is Chase goes to the Jets, is he a Pro Bowler? I don't know. I think he's still, at the end of the day, going to be a good football player, but he's not going to be put up the numbers that he's put up this year. And so I think, and then there's some players who they get buried. They go to certain teams and they're good football players, and they unfortunately get lost, and they got to wait for that next contract to hopefully get out of there and land in a spot that they can showcase their talents.
And who is throwing you the ball also plays a great factor in your ability to produce on the field, because when you have a Patrick Mahomes, or in your case, a Kurt Warner, it definitely makes it a lot easier. And over the first 5 seasons of your career, you were drafted by the Cardinals, you played with the Cardinals, had over 3,800 yards, 21 touchdowns, but you also played, from what I could find online in my research, you played with 8 different quarterbacks over that 5-year time period. What is that like when there's almost 2 quarterbacks every single season, whether one starting 1 game, one starting 6 games? What is it like week in and week out preparing with a different quarterback and not necessarily knowing Kurt Warner's our guy the entire year when there's more continuity at the quarterback position?
It's difficult. I think, looking back, it was frustrating. Like you said, I played for, it may have been more than 8, my first 5 years. I know the first time I played with a quarterback back-to-back season was Kurt Warner in 99, and then Kurt Warner again in 2000. I caught passes for over 20 quarterbacks, caught touchdowns from 17. But I look back now, and the first 10 years, as much as it was tough, the continuity was just, trying to get the timing down, and a different guy every year was hard, but it probably made me who I was. And because what I really realized was I had to be a great route runner. I wanted that quarterback to know that I was going to be where I was supposed to be when I was supposed to be there. And I took great pride in trying to be one of the best route runners in the league, just because I didn't know who was going to be throwing me the ball. And a lot of times we didn't have time. I wasn't on good teams to where we could protect for a long period of time. It was 3-step, 5-step at the most, get rid of the football, hitch and throw it. And I just remember as a player watching Chris Carter run these deep overs with Minnesota and say, God, it would be nice to have the time to be able to run those type of routes. I felt like we were constantly in quick games, slants, curl routes. But it was part of my journey. And I think, as frustrating as it was, it's probably why I played 17 years, because when I started having some continuity with quarterbacks, it became really a lot of fun. And I was on winning teams, and I didn't want to quit playing because it was so much fun, because I'd lost for so many years. And when you're winning, you don't want to leave the game. It becomes easy. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough on anybody. I feel sorry for some of these guys that struggle. Quarterbacks get hurt, and they got backups, and then they get hurt. There's some good football players out there that I know are frustrated, and but it's part of the game. It's life. I mean, it's not just football. It's life. There's people out there that are struggling, trying to find their way, but that's what the game teaches you is being resilient and battle back from adversity, and just you learn a lot about yourself playing this game for sure.
Yeah, and to the point about how long your career wound up lasting, I was watching the Brady documentary. It was either when he lost the undefeated season to the Giants. He spoke to the fact that he's not sure if his career would have wound up being as long as it was if it wasn't for that type of loss, where had a chance at making NFL history and then just fell a couple inches short effectively. Those failures definitely seem to fuel players to be more successful or play a number of years.
You remember the heartbreaking losses more than you remember the victories and the thrill of victory. You really do. The ones that we lost with the Panthers, and the Panthers especially, I felt like we had a good chance to win that football game, and we had Brady and the Patriots on the ropes, and unfortunately, our kicker kicked it out of bounds, and now you give it to Tom on the 40-yard line, and it's hard to stop him, where all he needs to gain is 15-20 yards.
Well, Tom on the 20-yard line would have been scary too.
Yeah,
maybe in today's NFL, even a little scarier, considering we had Patrick Mahomes go 40, 50 yards in 10 seconds with 13.
Game changed. It's crazy.
So with your time with the Rams, that's where you played in 2 of your 4 Super Bowl appearances. And your first year there, the Rams were bad. They only won 4 of their 16 games. But then that following season is one of the most magical seasons in NFL history. It's one of the most referenced offenses in NFL history. What was that offseason like, to where you went from a team that was maybe even made fun of in the media to what the team wound up becoming? And like I said, one of the most renowned teams, most referenced team names in NFL history.
If you look at the years prior to the 99 season, you look at 98, 97, when Dick got there, you look at his draft picks from Orlando Pace to London Fletcher, Grant Wistrom, Torrey Holt, Dre Bly, Roland Williams, Dexter McCleon. I look at, and then the free agents, Ray Agnew. He brought in myself. Hay had some guys, and then he had a method to his madness, and he did an amazing job. We had 5th round draft picks, Robert Holcomb, Tony Horn, Oz Akeem, that turned into starters. I mean, you look at his draft picks those 2 years, these guys were impact players within 2 years. And then you go out and you bring some free agents. You trade for Marshall Faulk, draft Torrey. You already have Isaac Bruce there. You bring in Trent Green. That offseason was electric. It was unbelievable. The work ethic changed. Dick had us working hard, but now we started believing. You started looking around. It's Marshall Faulk. There's Torrey Holtz coming in, a well-polished rookie. Isaac was getting healthy. Oz Akeem was a dynamic receiver. We were loaded with talent, and we pushed each other. And I think the biggest thing that I look at that 99 team was we looked around and we realized we got some talent here. And especially with the addition of Marshall. Marshall was one of the smartest football players I've ever played with. But we were a selfless team. We became a selfless team. And I think it was an adjustment. Isaac was catching 115 balls a year, and he had to take kind of not a back, to Torrey, but it was more like, hey, do you want to catch 115 passes and go 4-12, or do you want to catch 85 balls and go to the Super Bowl and win? And we realized how good we were as a unit, as a group playing together, that we didn't care who scored the touchdown, who got the recognition. We just wanted to win football games. And it became so much fun to where I think it was a video of a DB saying on the sidelines going, it's a track meet out there. These guys are all over the place.
Yeah.
And we took great pride in it. And obviously we rallied when Trent went down. We rallied around Kurt. We started out, reducing our offense, but then he was able to take on more and more every week. And it was a special season that I'll never forget. We went from worst to first, and it was all those years of losing were erased when we won that year and how we won. And it was a lot of fun because everybody had a role on our team. For me, I didn't score a touchdown all year until the championship, but my role was coming in and catching first downs and moving the chains. And I took great pride in that. And, it was just a great group of guys, and it's a tribute to Dick Vermeil. I mean, the kind of high character people he brought in and who he drafted, something I'll never forget. It's something that I try to emulate and run in my business, and the people that I surround myself with and who I hire and who I bring in to help run different parts of my business.
You mentioned it, the touchdown you had in the championship game. I'm sure you've had to relive it thousands of times in interviews in the 20 years since that catch happened, since that game happened. What was going through your mind on that play to send the Rams to the Super Bowl effectively? Did you have any thoughts of better not fuck this up when you see the ball going through the air and going over your shoulder?
I'll be honest with you, when I took pride in, man, I wanted to be the guy. I was that guy that never shied away from wanting to make a play in a crucial time. My nickname was Clutch. Marshall nicknamed me Clutch because I would come in and make first downs. And he goes, I don't think what are you talking about? And he said, you come in off the bench, make first down. Everybody knew we were going to throw the ball to you. And then you come off and come back on. And so I knew I had to shield him off. And I just said, go up and kind of try to shield him away from the ball. The ball was a little underthrown, so I was walling him off and then just caught it over my shoulder. And it was a dream come true. It was every kid's dream of growing up, dreaming about making the big catch to win the game, whether it's in the Super Bowl, or for me, it was about helping getting my team to the Super Bowl. And it's something that it never gets old talking about it. You never forget what I felt like or what it felt like to make that play and to see my family in the stands and my teammates. It was just, it was an amazing feeling.
Now, who wound up getting to keep that ball? We saw Mike Evans throw Tom Brady's, 600th touchdown pass into the stands. Is that something you get to, do you know who has that ball?
I have that. I have the ball.
You do have it.
I got it at home. Yes. You know what also ball that is sitting in a pizzeria that was just voted #1 pizzeria in New Jersey, New York, and maybe even the country. Barstool's voted Delucia's Pizzeria. I probably shouldn't say this. The Super Bowl ball that Mike Jones stopped Kevin Dyson.
Yeah.
Someone knocked it out of his hands. It was spinning the end zone. And when we all sprinted out in the field, it was there. I grabbed it. That thing, yeah.
How'd it wind up in the pizzeria?
Because my high school coach, who was dying of cancer, was in the stands, and his best friend owned that pizzeria. And I gave it to him. And he gave it they made a little showcase of my Super Bowl jersey and that football. in the pizzeria.
So playing in the Super Bowl is something almost 100% of people never get to experience. Playing in any championship in any sport, most people never get to experience. People who are professionals in that sports, most don't even get to experience. So what was it like you've been in 4. What was it like the first time you made it there, to walk into the stadium pregame, then into the stadium when the game starts? What was that whole first experience like, and just playing in the Super Bowl in general?
It was, it's everything that you imagined, everything you dreamed, everything you hoped it would be. It is. I mean, it just feels like you're faster, you're quicker. It's such an adrenaline rush coming out of that tunnel, and then just being out there. I mean, when I played in my last one, when I was 38 years old, almost 39, I mean, I felt like I was 21 years old again. It's an amazing feeling. It's nothing like it. You wish every player that played in the NFL could experience playing in the Super Bowl. It's that kind of adrenaline rush. And that's why Tom Brady, he'll tell you, I mean, you want to get back because it's an amazing experience. And it's, like I said, you feel bad for the great players that never had the opportunity to play in it, because they deserve to feel what it feels to play in the Super Bowl. It's absolutely amazing.
That first Super Bowl was definitely a roller coaster, from getting out to the 16-point lead. Then the Titans claw back and tie up the game at 16. And then you have Isaac Bruce answer right back with a 73-yard touchdown. And then they almost answer right back. You just mentioned the Kevin Dyson down to the 1-inch line, essentially. So what were your emotions like throughout that game as you get out to the big lead, then the lead evaporates, and then they almost even come back and send you guys to overtime?
I was thinking, oh my God, it's never easy. You know, it's McNair was unbelievable. Strong as an ox, breaking tackles, extending plays. Just watching him was like, tackle him. You know, we were tired. Kevin Carter was tired. You know, our defensive front people were giving it everything they got, but it was a long game that was just an unbelievable fight, and our defense was tired. And McNair made plays, and where our angle, when he threw it to Dyson, I thought he was in. I thought he scored, to be honest with you. I thought maybe we were going to overtime. And then when I saw the ref wave that game's over, we all just went crazy and ran onto the field. But it was, oh my God, I can't imagine what my heart rate was at that time. I mean, everybody was. I mean, we were just, you know, when you have no control and you're just watching the defense and you're trying to cheer on your teammates to stop them. And hats off to the late Steve McNair and the Titans. I mean, they fought their tail off, and it just made you realize, and what you see, and I'm sure you saw last week in the championship game, a lot of teams, a lot of coaches get nervous when you get, especially as the game goes on and it gets tighter. A lot of them, they don't want to make a mistake, so they're not airing it out as much. They stick closer to the vest, and I thought we did that. We got up to a 16-point lead, and we kind of sat on it a little bit. We got a little conservative, and it ended up almost biting us in the tail.
So you wound up winning that game. Next year you went to the championship, unfortunately lost in the championship, and then you eventually played in your second Super Bowl. When you look at the next 2 seasons, the second Super Bowl appearance where you fell short against the Patriots and you dominant during the regular season, and then from an outsider's perspective, it almost seems like the Rams dynasty was short-lived and didn't necessarily live up to expectations. When you take a look at the highs going from nothing to the Super Bowl to then still dominant, but falling short in 2 seasons, why do you think that happened? And do you think there was even small things that could have been done to extend the Rams' legacy, or Greatest Show on Turf's legacy, and could have led to multiple Super Bowl wins?
Yeah, I think we underachieved. I think the biggest component, to be completely honest, I think Mike Martz was one of the best offensive minds to ever coach the game, but I think he was almost his own enemy, you know, a worst nightmare. I think if Dick Vermeil stays and doesn't retire after the Super Bowl year, I think we go on and maybe win 3 in a row. I mean, our offense, you look at what our offense did for 3 years straight, I mean, was arguably the best, most prolific offense in NFL history. You know, sometimes you need a head coach to kind of pull the reins back and say, run the football. New England's dropping 8 guys, run it. And I think we weren't as balanced. When Dick was there, we were more balanced. If you look back at that Super Bowl, we got the best tailback MVP, Marshall Faulk, in the league. And I don't know how many touches he ran the ball in the second half of that Super Bowl, but it wasn't enough. And as a receiver, I want to catch footballs, but they're dropping 8 guys, draw play. We needed to run the football more. And we were a better football team in that season, but they were a better football team that day. And I think a lot of it was of what we did on that particular Sunday to lose the football game. And we didn't play our best football. And hats go off, New England played a great game. But I don't necessarily think that they went out and won it. I think we just didn't. We lost the football game.
You, of course, we've spoken a little about Kurt Warner, and then in the last season of your career, you wound up playing with Peyton Manning. And we also spoke about the fact that you played with several different quarterbacks. What is it like playing with a Hall of Fame talent and quarterback in Kurt Warner or Peyton Manning?
To me, to have the opportunity to play with Peyton Manning, I mean, Kurt was unbelievable. I mean, to be a guy that could, his game, he didn't have the strongest arm. His game was timing. I mean, he understood the offense. He understood where the ball needed to be. I mean, if you stood behind Kurt when he delivered a football, you'd be like, where is he throwing to? Who's he throwing to? And then all of a sudden you'd see Torrey coming, screaming in there on a deep dig route, or you'd see me on a corner route, or Isaac or Oz. And he was unbelievable in getting the ball out on time, throwing it to spots. And Peyton was a lot of the same. Peyton was probably the smartest football player I have ever been on a football field with. Marshall was one of them, but Peyton was probably the smartest. He was a coach on the field. I mean, he understood what defenses were doing before he snapped the ball. He knew exactly what coverage they were going to roll into or go to. And he had the perfect play. Like, he was just, that's why he started ice cream and Omaha. And he snapped and he would change the play because he knew what coverage they were going to run. And he was, and a great teammate. You know, you think of Peyton, you think of stardom, great, Hall of Famer. I signed there in November, and he took me under his wing as a teammate, where a lot of guys wouldn't have done that. You know, you come in, you're 11-1, and you're bringing this guy in because you've had some injuries. He called me. I was coaching Pop Warner. He called me on the phone. Where are you at? I thought we were signing you. I said, well, we haven't worked out the numbers. Well, I'm going to get it done. We're going to get you in here. He took notes on the way, practice, the Super Bowl week. He brought, hey, Ricky, come here. Started taking notes. What's the Super Bowl week? What's media day like? What can I expect? I addressed the team. I talked. I mean, he was just an amazing leader, amazing football player. And a lot of people don't know what, and God, I mean, he could probably act. He's funny. Some of these shows, but he's just a great guy to be around. And it was, I was real fortunate to have the opportunity to play with him, even though it was only for a couple of months.
And what is it like heading into that 17th year compared to heading into your first year or 5th year and 6th year? What was it like playing the position at an older age compared to when you were a rookie in the NFL?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you understand the game. You understand when you got to turn it on, just kind of pacing yourself. And at that point, they were allowing me not to do, I had done two-a-days for 16 years. My last year, I didn't have to do two-a-days. But it's just understanding you got to stay in shape. You got to take care of your body to be able to play that long and play at a high level. But it was fun. When you're getting the opportunity to play with Peyton Manning, Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, like, you're winning. Like, I never forgot those years, 4-12, 3-13. And now you're coming out as a playoff contender, Super Bowl contender. That's why you play the game. To win, to get a shot at another ring. And I was fortunate to go out as a Super Bowl champion with the Colts and to play in 4 Super Bowls in my last 7 years, make it to the playoffs a ton of times where I didn't get play on national TV until my 8th year in the league. You relish those moments. It never got old coming out of the tunnel. It never got old just being a part of, in my mind, the greatest game in our country. And I loved it, and I didn't take it for granted.
And you then made the transition to coaching, and you coached 6 years with the Panthers right after your playing career. What was that transition like for you? And a lot of players say, I think Peyton Manning has said it before, a lot of players say that they don't feel like they could coach because they would get too worked up about their players not caring enough about the game or not putting forth the same type of effort or not playing this same type of way they did. Was that something that was hard for you to overcome initially when you started coaching in the NFL?
No, it really wasn't. I'm a relationship guy. And I think, coaching is kind of like being a parent. I know some coaches believe in treating everybody the same. And I think certain guys, you got to know how to push their buttons, when to back off, when to get on them. Certain guys, you can have your foot on their throat all the time. And they're good at that. They want that. And then other guys, you can't do that because they'll shut down. I took pride in knowing each of my players and giving them the respect they deserved, but also putting them in a position to have success. And I think they knew that. And when you know that and you have that relationship, a player-coach relationship, you can get everything out of your players. And that's what I tried to do is I took great pride in doing that, because I knew how, as a player, how I wanted to be coached. And I knew I had different coaches. Some were great and some I didn't like their delivery, how they, some of the things they said or how they treated certain players. And I knew I didn't want to be that guy. And I think so playing for 17 years taught me a lot, prepared me for that moment as a coach. I think the toughest thing is the hours as a coach. It's a lot of long hours. It's a lot of stuff being said about players on headphones that really bothered me at first. And I kind of learned it's just their frustrations. It wasn't personal, but that was a tough transition for me, just hearing them talk about players and then act like they were, but like I said, a lot of it was just frustrations and them wanting to execute. If a player didn't execute the way they wanted them to, or the way they practiced all week, a lot of frustrations came out. Like you said, like Peyton said, why he couldn't coach. But for me, that was never an issue with me. I just felt like guys are going to make mistakes. It's part of the game. I mean, it's the other guys get paid on the other side too. And you learn from your mistakes, you get better through your mistakes. And that's what my approach was to the game as a coach.
Is there anything in the future where you see going back to coaching, is there any set of perfect circumstances where you see yourself heading back into coaching in the NFL? Or I've seen you, and you're very successful at it, just doing coaching and training players at the college, high school, and NFL level outside at Prolific, or now when you go to LA or when you went to Florida. Is there any set of perfect circumstances where you see yourself going back to the NFL again?
Well, I've had some opportunities and I've turned them down. I'll never say never, because I love coaching. I love working with young people. I'm kind of getting that feel right now where it's not coaching at the highest level, but it's preparing guys that want to play at the next level, whether it's high school kids wanting to play in college kids wanting to play in the NFL. And it's very enjoyable, very, very rewarding. I love it. I love the park. So to get back into coaching, it would have to be a scenario of location where it's convenient, where I can check on the park, make sure things are going right. I've got getting ready to be a grandfather. I'm all about family. I'm all about a lot of my relationships. I'm at a point in my life where once you go to the other side and you have your freedom to have your own schedule and work your tail off, being your own boss, and then do what you want to do when you want to do it, it's hard to go back. But I would never say never. I love coaching. I'm not afraid to work 16, 17-hour days, but it would be tough. It would have to be going back for a friend, or going back to a perfect scenario where it's a great place to live, great place to coach. And, maybe I don't have the day-to-day grind of Prolific Park.
You've coached players from every level. You've played on every level. What do you think is the biggest mistake young athletes make, maybe even professional athletes, as they look to get their chance in the NFL, prepare for the NFL, or even are looking to play at an elite Division I program?
I think a lot of guys will go out and train, and they train hard, but it's kind of like studying for a test. Are you studying for the things that you don't know, or are you studying for the things you already know? A lot of these kids are fast, but they're still working on speed. A lot of them have great agility. They're still working on agility. Some of them aren't great catchers. They need to work on catching the football, coming back, attacking the football. Some of them need to be working on their routes, working on the things that they're not good at to bring their level up. And I think that's some of the things that I preach to a lot of the guys I train. People ask me, who'd you throw with? I said, I didn't throw with anybody. I knew I could catch. I worked on running routes, just me at Guilford College, just running routes on that field. Just, I wanted to be the best route runner. I learned how to drop my weight and make everything look the same to where I could get in and out. And I didn't care who I was going up against. I was going to beat them because I was going to be such a great route runner. I wasn't going to give them any inkling of a hint of what kind of route I was running. And that's what I worked on. I tried to watch film and look at the things that I needed to improve on, whether it was bump and run, releases, playing on the outside versus cover two. It was certain things that, I think a lot of people will say, well, I was afraid to fail. That's why I felt like I'm a good player. I was never afraid to fail, because that's how I got better. If I got jammed at the line, or if I didn't run a great route, why didn't I run a great route? What happened to me here? Why did I get jammed? I didn't use my hands. I think that's why I was able to play for 17 years, because I was constantly working on trying to improve, trying to get better. Your game changes as you get older. You're not getting any faster. So you've got to be more efficient in everything you do. And I think that's what some of these kids the kids that I work on or work with, I think the biggest thing is when you ask them, they don't have an inkling of what they really need to get better at. They all say, well, I could be a better route runner, or I need to get faster. Being faster isn't going to make you necessarily a great receiver. Getting open, you got to get open, and that's being efficient, getting in and out of your cuts, creating separation, and then obviously catching the football and working on getting upfield right now. And it's a lot of these guys, like I said, they're in the weight room when they need to be out on the field. Devontae Adams said it great. They're doing all these Mickey Mouse cone drills. Does that relate or transfer to running routes? Not necessarily.
The one I've seen you use in, I think, every single training session that I've had the privilege of watching and recording is with the 6 cones every 5 yards. And you definitely use it for a purpose of giving them a visual aid of where they need to load their weight, where they need to get out of their breaks. And then you definitely see, I think you see it the most with young athletes, but you see it on social media all the time. High school athletes, elementary school athletes, where they're doing drills and you're just left wondering what was the purpose of that. And I think that's also what some coaches fail to even show their athletes, where they're just going through the motions. And then if they're asked by maybe an outsider watching what they're doing, they can't even verbalize what they're doing or why they were doing it sometimes.
Oh, you're right. That's exactly right. I mean, it's crazy. I watch some of these videos and I'm like, releases with karaoke's and running around cones and backpedaling in a circle and, going forward and backward. You don't ever use that movement in running a route. And for me, maybe I'm old school, but it's frustrating. You can do different stuff. I mean, you look at a ladder, you want to work on quick feet, doing different stuff. A ladder is still one of your better tools for doing that. And then there's some guys that don't need to do anything. They're so gifted. They can just line up and play. And those are the guys that I envy, because there's, the Randy Mosses of the world that can just line up and run faster than everybody and just make plays because he's fast and he's great hand-eye coordination. And it's guys that are fun to watch as well. But it's like Parcells said, receivers and football players come in all shapes and sizes. And some of these coaches and some of these GMs, they all want big, fast, muscular guys. And there's a lot of guys that are small. The Tyreek Hills, the Tariq Cohen, that came onto the scene. Obviously, he's been injured the last couple of years, but they come in all shapes and sizes. Some of the best players. I got the fortunate to play with linebacker, was one of the smallest linebackers, London Fletcher, who in my mind is a Hall of Famer. And he wasn't the prototype looking linebacker when he got off the bus, but he had a great work ethic and he worked at his game every year in and year out. He got 200 tackles a year.
I think people are also obsessed with the what ifs in sports, especially the what ifs when it comes to players' careers. And this is a question that I've asked everyone else I've had the privilege of interviewing, Kevin, DeAndre, and also TJ, was who's the biggest what if player that you remember from your career, from coaching, maybe even recently? For me, as a Giants fan, growing up a Giants fan, it's always going to be Victor Cruz, because I watched him as a 14-year-old put up 1,500 receiving yards, win a Super Bowl, and then his career almost fell apart 3 years later, where he was one of the biggest names in the NFL. So is there anyone that sticks out to you, whether it be it doesn't have to be a receiver, could be running back, or even on the other side of the ball on defense?
What if, for me, my biggest what if is Josh Gordon. I got an opportunity to coach him in the Pro Bowl. And to me, what if he didn't have a disease, have a drug problem? It was sad. And I talked to him about it. He was the most talented person, bar none, for size, speed, route running, hands, that I've ever seen on a football field. And I think he could have been one of the greatest to ever play the game. He was that good. And think about it, all the stuff that how many times he had been suspended, kicked out of leagues, brought back, people kept signing him. I think I coached him in the 2000, I don't know what it was, Pro Bowl 13, 14. He was unbelievable. And I think he's my biggest what if. What if he didn't have it? He's a Hall of Fame football player. He was one of the most talented, a guy that at 6'4", 230 could run and get in and out of cuts like a guy that was 5'8", 5'11", 195 pounds. He was that good, and he could have been a tremendous football player for a long time.
Well, there's a reason he's on his, effectively sixth, seventh chance or whatever it may be, whatever that number is. It's higher than one, it's higher than two, that the Chiefs wound up signing him for this season in an effort to build a supporting cast around their Tyreek and Travis Kelce. So that is all the questions I have. I greatly appreciate you doing this for me, especially since I know you just got out to LA for Super Bowl week and also to train and work with a bunch of different guys. So once again, thank you for doing this interview with me. And I hopefully am going to have it up within the next day on Saturday.
Get it done, big guy. It's a pleasure, and I appreciate you having me, man. I always enjoy seeing you doing your thing, Tristan. Keep up the good work, bud.
Thank you.